international assets. So our clearing and custody and the brokerages through which we trade are all offshore. So they've got absolutely no risk to South Africa at all. And in fact, if this kind of unrest continues, then I think our business will benefit, because obviously you're just going to see a flight of capital from South Africa to offshore markets, and it presents zero risk, the fact that we're a South African institution.
So just unpack that for us. If Anarchy were to get to a ridiculous level, and it's no longer just a theoretical question, it's a practical question in many people's minds, and they decide to depart the country and to go elsewhere, will they still have access, and how, to the money that they've invested with EasyEquities into the US and Australia?
Yeah, I mean, as I think Alec, the business is entirely virtual and online, and there's no gatekeepers. It's not like you have to walk into an office in Sandton to unlock your funds and get access to the safe. So it's all of the same procedures and processes that they use now, i.e. they would log on online. They would, they'd probably want to change their banking details, because potentially, let's just say that they didn't want the cash to come back to their South African bank account, and they wanted to move to an offshore bank account. So they would have to go through a verification process to change their banking details. And then, to the extent that they wanted to withdraw their funds, they would give us the instruction, we would verify the bank, and the money would flow to that bank account. So nothing changes. I think the risk is not to your online assets. The risk is, or to your, let's call them virtual assets, because everything in the stock trading world has been demutualized. So the risk is your physical assets, your title deeds to your property in South Africa, and your assets that you store in a bank vault in South Africa. Those are the assets that are at risk. These, and I don't like to use the word virtual assets for things like shares, but essentially stock ownership has been virtualized. All of it is, the registries are all online, the custody and clearing and settlement is all online. So, it's as secure as anything else, and it doesn't matter. Just because we're a South African registered business doesn't make any difference to the security of those assets.
Have you seen that there has been an increase in demand? I know it's very early days in the last week, but a lot of people, certainly from the feedback we are getting, were shocked by what has happened, the unthinkable happening in their own country, and now would want to externalize if possible.
Yeah, it has. I mean, the demand just ticked up overnight. Lots of customers who hadn't thought about a US stockbroking account suddenly thinking about it, wanting to understand how to open it and what they need to do. I think we're all a little bit deers in the headlights for the last 7 days. Certainly that's how I felt about it. I think, we started to unpack, or started to understand what's happened. Not really understand it, but I think get a glimpse of what may have occurred. And I think as certainty around the events unfold, you're either going to see resilient capital staying and backing, government and the political framework, or alternatively, I think you're going to see South Africans take their capital and move them offshore. But certainly, we saw an immediate increase in requests to say, okay, so I've got a South African account. What do I need to do to get my US account set up? So sadly, that's capital is bound. It's, there are no boundaries on capital anymore. And even exchange control, the hurdles are so low or so high that the average user doesn't apply. So, I think our users are going to be watching very closely. The Rand is telling a little bit of a different story. I ended up having coffee on Saturday with one of the senior guys at a large bank, head of securities at a large bank. And it was interesting. He was saying that international capital were not fazed by this at all. In fact, his comment was, we priced these kind of events into investing in South Africa. And sure, we're going to sit on our hands a little and just watch how it unfolds. But frankly, this is part of our investment thesis and case. And, we think the response so far has been good. And this isn't a coup, and this isn't anarchy, and the government is taking steps to resolve it. And might you see the weakness as an opportunity to invest more? So it's interesting how people see it from other sides. Here in South Africa, we do get Stockholm syndrome. We see it for what it is. And, our reference and context is, what was it like yesterday? And, it's been getting worse for a long time now. But international have priced this kind of risk in. So it's interesting to see how this is going to unpack. But certainly retail investors are saying, I need to be ready if anything continues to happen.
I suppose it's one thing sitting in a part of the country that's been relatively unaffected, and another thing entirely if for the past week you've been manning barricades, spending your time with other heavily armed people, just waiting to protect your family in case something were to occur. And of course, that's been the case in many parts of KwaZulu-Natal. Are you finding that people from that province in particular are requesting greater investments, maybe opening up those the US accounts, or are they just too flat out at the moment looking after their own possessions, not to be able to get there?
Yeah, look, I think they're shell-shocked. I mean, funny enough, met somebody at your conference who was telling me about how her and her kids had to be airlifted out by helicopter. That's a very different context to, sitting in a Sandton home and, everything sort of worked. And it, social media brings it closer and makes it very real for all of us. So, I can't say we're unaffected. I was seriously affected. It was the worst week in my life as a citizen of South Africa, as someone who staunchly supports South Africa by far. But my context is very different, and definitely, if I was sitting in the epicenter of it, I probably would have been making more rash decisions. And we haven't seen that in the data. It's not like our Natal clients are different behavior to even that the social media context is having the same impact for everyone. But I do feel like last week it is a case of us being deers in the headlight. I think people are sitting going, this was a radical onslaught of my beliefs in South Africa, my commitment to the country, my senses, my sense of security, everything. And I think it's going to take us a little bit of time to digest and see what the real impact is going to be. I mean, I think we're definitely going to see more immigration than we've ever seen before. It's you and I are a different age group and have a very different context on this. If you're 35 and you were wondering about whether you're going to stay or go, I don't think you're wondering anymore. I think you're going to say, well, why don't I just watch from the other side of the world for a while rather than sit here and watch it from here? So I think age is a big determinant of how people will take the news and the impact. And I think that, the assets for the last 10 decades, assets have been going offshore. I think, most of the wealth managers are sitting at 60% assets offshore. I think that's going to ratchet up a bit more now. You're going to see probably 70% of assets move offshore. People will take advantage of a strong rand and, let their capital sit from the outside and look in rather than the other way around, which is probably, it's hard. How do you defend that? I mean, I'm a massive South African bull. I think we're going to have a great decade ahead of us. I think there were signs of light at the end of last week that give me cause to think that that this might be a tipping point for the unification of the country. I think the middle is going to get stronger and that the left and right will become weaker as a result of these events. So, I'm positive about the future, but I'm not 30 years old. And if I was, I think I'd be making different choices.
Yeah, well, the centre certainly held in KwaZulu-Natal. Nobody ran, nobody got in their car and just ducked and tried to get away. Perhaps COVID was a blessing in that regard. The airports weren't full because the planes weren't going out, et cetera, et cetera. So one doesn't know. Certainly the insights we have show a pretty different story, that it's the rural Zulus who were given the orders and the little impies that went up there. But this will all come out in the fullness of time. Getting back to your company, last time we spoke, you were looking to welcome potentially a new investor on board. Your chairman, Mark Barnes, or ex-chairman rather, who was going to be selling off part of his shareholding. He was very upbeat about it, saying that the new investors who were coming in were exciting additions and supports for Purple Capital. And then we saw the share price reacting accordingly. That was due to expire a couple of weeks ago, their option. I haven't seen anything reported. Certainly we haven't reported on it yet. Can you update us on what was going on?
Yeah, so the deal, I think it went through SENS last week. The deal's completely completed. 200 million odd shares have changed hands. And it's a very satisfying event for me because, what you're seeing is a little bit of a changing in the guard. We've had, as you know, we've had the most incredible shareholders for a long time now, and specifically in Lubna and Barnes, who stood by us in really tough times, 2008 and beyond. And what they did is exited at good prices for them relative to where they got those shares. But I think the important part, and that's sort of looking back, the really important part is for a big exiting group of shareholders, you have to find capital that is confident about what the future looks like. And the future, they bought in at R1.10, which is 300% above where we were just a year ago. And they're buying in at those prices with a strong sense that the future is going to be far greater than the past, and that R1.10 is a good entry price. I'm also very pleased to say that the Mark and the Lubna family are also staying in. It's not like they've sold everything and they're going away. Mark has been a massive part of this organization. He's been the backbone of the shareholder group for a very long time. And Mark deserved a good exit on his shares, and I'm glad that he got those. But he still wants to play a meaningful role in the future. So it's not like they're not abandoning ship. They're not, it's a positive statement. And I think the key thing for me is that both the Lubna grouping and Mark Barnes grouping, they wanted to ensure that a shareholder of reference came in who bought into management strategy and the future of the group. And in Paul Rutherford, who represents a much larger group of shareholders than just himself, we found someone who's got the venture capital background to really understand the assets. And I don't say this lightly. I think he understands the business as well as anyone else within the business. He spent a lot of time unpacking it and looking into the data and understanding where this thing might go. He also has the context of international investment landscape and where we could take the asset and how best to manage it, its balance sheet and the shareholding group going forward. And for me, he's more aligned with what we want to do with the group, which is to grow it aggressively again. We've grown the group out of the income statement of the group for the last 10 years, which has served us well and creates very good discipline. To grow a business out of your own income statement it's not easy, but it does create a really good set of disciplines. I think the next decade will be defined about where are the opportunity sets where we can raise capital and go after market opportunities that are greater than our income statements, if you like, and to scale this business sort of 10 times over the next 5 to 10 years. And Paul will be a great advocate for that and a great resource for us because, we're mostly just South African who've applied our trade here in South Africa. And we need to have, we need some new skills on board and people that will rationally object to the things that we do or rationally support the plans that we have. So very exciting, very exciting for the group and certainly for me. I mean, I'm dedicated to staying for as long as they'll keep me. I don't want to go anywhere. And I think the most important thing about me in terms of operating the business is I've always wanted and enjoyed having strong shareholders who support the vision. And the risk is that over time, you can end up with a shareholding group that is disparate and not really strategic and doesn't support the vision of the group, in which case as CEO, you don't really have the handle on the direction of the ship. And I can say that, I still got that handle on the ship because the shareholding group are big supporters of what we're doing and even greater supporters of the things that we want to do in the future. So very exciting time to be CEO of Purple Group and to welcome Paul and the rest of the shareholders who came in.
Did you sell any of your shares in this transaction?
No, I didn't. Otherwise, it's just I laugh at it every time. Like I wanted to lighten up. I mean, I've got a lot of debt, and I'm happy to say that I've backed myself into this group for a long time. And every time I had a target at R1.20 and said, "Look, I must lighten up." My bank manager phoned me at R1.20 and said, "Charles, you're going to lighten up," and I haven't lightened up. But no, so I haven't sold any shares. At some point, I'll have to. There's just that right now the debt is in my favor in the sense that cost of debt is cheap, but if things change, then I'll look to lighten up. I hate selling any shares, but it's I haven't sold any shares.
And the entry, I love the way that you've explained it. Is it's been through income statement growth, in other words, internally funded, with Paul Rutherford and his associates coming in. if you, for instance, found an opportunity to enter the UK market, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just hypothetically, would they be able to support you in that ambition?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, there are two kind of things that work in our favor now. One is the market cap of the company. If we were raising money this time last year, it was a 300 million rand market cap. And if you're going to do anything meaningful, you're going to raise like $20 million. So, we'd have diluted out and lost interest. So the market cap of the group is now sort of 1.5, 1.6 billion, depending on what day you look at the share price. So if we want to do something meaningful and raise, let's just say $20 million to pursue an international strategy, then it's not a massive dilution. It's a 15% dilution, and anyone will accept it. It's probably the right time to do it. And I think the key thing about the next couple of years is, can we do it somewhere else? I think the South African business, we've locked down an extraordinary opportunity, which, you could write this down. This is a 3x business over the next 3 to 5 years in South Africa alone. So, what shareholders should expect is to see 3 times their return over the next 3 to 5 years. And let's just, I'm not counting in a failed state scenario in South Africa. So let's just, assume status quo. But the real opportunity is, can we replicate this somewhere else in a market that is bigger than South Africa? Can we take it to India? Can we take it to places in Africa, or multiple places in Africa? Are there places in Europe that would work? And that's where I've been spending a lot of my time and focus. And, once COVID lets me out, that's where I've got to spend all my time and focus, is to decide where we're going to do this that is bigger and better than South Africa. Because if we get that right, then it's a kind of 10x play for us. And the market, there's never been a better time to be in fintech, and specifically in investment services like we're in. It's funny, and Alec, you know this. I mean, when has investing in shares ever been a red hot topic? I mean, it's always been niche and marginalized, and for the higher sort of value or high net wealth individuals. But this democratization of financial service, and specifically all things investing, that it's a hot topic. And when things are hot, you've got to run with them, and you've got a business plan into more markets. And I guess I've been waiting 20 years to do this, and the time is now. And I really am excited. And the only thing stopping me is COVID, because there aren't any excuses now. Like a year ago, I would have said we don't have the right capital base, we don't have the right shareholding structure. Those things are resolved thanks to this transaction, and thanks to our share price, and thanks to Lubna and Mark and Barnes paving the way for these shareholders to entry. That's the other thing, is people criticize them for selling. What they don't realize is that they've enabled the rest of the shareholders who stayed, because by bringing this new shareholder base in, there's access to capital to fulfill our dreams and aspirations. So the other shareholders should be thanking the Lubna Group and Barnes Group for making the space for these new investors to join us.
Just to close off with, I'd like to go back to something you said earlier, that this past week has made you kind of reassess where you are as a South African, and the worst week, I think you said, in your life. What are you in your reflections? What are you actually making of all of this and the way ahead?
Yeah, she's Alec. I'm also a bit of a deer in the headlights still, but the first part of last week, shook me, because I've actually set lines in the sand around South Africa about where the country has to be for me to stay, and it was like we didn't just walk over the line; we jumped over it and then carried on running past it. So I really, and it is quite personal, but I'll share it just to contextualize. I got a WhatsApp from my 11-year-old daughter at 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday to say she was scared. And, is she safe? And shouldn't we go somewhere for a while? That was, now that shook me to my core. And then by Friday, there were signs that we were going to stand together, from every age group, every race group. We're going to stand together and defend the country, because it's greater. We can't let the 1% crowd us out. And, maybe it's not 1% that are maybe it's 2 or 3%. But I think the thing that gives me the real context to stay and to fight for a better South Africa is that we are the majority, those who want to stand together, protect industry, protect our neighborhoods, protect our families and friends. We're standing shoulder to shoulder, and I think we're going to drive off this insurgency and be stronger for it. And the thing that I'm really looking for which, I think Cyril in his second speech last week was way better than in his first. There needs to be, if you like, dictatorial democracy. You need a leader that emerges, that gives us the strength to believe that the future is going to be different, and they will be judged on their actions, not their words. And the platform is set for that. And Cyril's the guy. He has to take almost. He's got to take control, and he's got to take action. And if he does, I think the support he'll get now will be incredible, because we all want it. We all are looking for that leadership, that someone to believe in again. And I think the platform's set. And I think what Cyril has seen is that there are more people on his side than are against him. He would have been concerned that this could have been his end as well. So, I'm a passionate stayer, but I have to reassess where my lines in the sand sit now, and what are the flags that I'm going to watch. And I think the key flag for me is action out of government. I'm not interested in words. I'm not turning on another Cyril Ramaphosa speech. I want to read the headlines. I want people in jail. I want to see them prosecuted. And if I see that, then I'm firmly going to stick around and convince other people to do the same.